I love to open up the chat for question and answer. If you had any questions on any specific presentations, throw it in the chat, throw it in the Q&A, and we'll get your questions answered in the next 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm looking at the I'm going to look at the Q&A here, just read some of the questions.
Sure. There's a lot of questions on, hey, am I going to be able to get this slide deck? Am I going to get, recordings of the videos? By the end of the week, we'll send out some communication. It will be on our Hire AZ YouTube page with the playlist broken down every single session, as well as we'll get the PowerPoints and slide decks out to everybody that attended as well.
Okay, and that addresses a few of the questions, so I can actually deal with those here. But let's read a question from Jennifer Beveridge. Excuse me. As a recruiter with only specific industry experience, how would I market myself for other industries? In my opinion, our skill is transferable to any level of recruitment. However, not many places hiring believe that they want a specific industry. So from anybody here, how would you market yourself? How do you market yourself to different industries? Anybody can just start chiming in.
Well, so that's what my talk was about. So I'll jump in there.
Yeah, add some more good stuff.
Yeah, I do agree that it's really frustrating seeing people saying that they want experience for a specific industry because our skills are transferable. So I think it's just remembering the fundamentals, having stories that address the fundamentals, like I was talking about in my presentation. So have the stories ready that talk about when you had difficulty with a hiring manager or a client, when you had to work especially hard on sourcing, when you had to work, search for that purple monkey, and you had to educate the hiring manager. You had to take a consultative approach. All those nice keywords that people like to hear. That show that you're really engaged and you're really, helping, that it's a two-way street. You're not just an order taker, but you're educating your client as well. So I think having those stories ready are gonna help a lot.
Yeah, I can add one more thing, and this is a really good opportunity to use the GPTs, whether it's OpenAI, Claude, Gemini, Grok, is there are an inordinate number of industry analysis papers out there. And that's where you can use, I like Grok, GROQ.com, because it has multiple LLMs, different algorithms, if you will. And you can, and Tom, you spoke about that, very eloquently, is you can type a prompt that says, thinking like an expert or thinking like an industry expert in this industry. What are the top 10 business challenges that would impact the viability of a company between the years 2024 and 2027? And you can use things like that. And I can guarantee you that most recruiters you speak with don't know these things. So you're going to have a leg up on them.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I was mentioning that I hadn't recruited truckers, but I had a friend who did a lot of hiring of truckers at Penske. So I would mention that and talk about what was going on in the industry during the pandemic, because uh, actually you saw a lot of the same parallels that you saw in tech. You saw like hiring going crazy, you saw salaries going crazy, and then things swung way back the other way. So I would mention that on my calls too, and some of the challenges that he was facing. So even if I didn't have any hands-on experience doing that recruiting, it showed that I knew what was going on a bit in that industry.
And it just jumped into my head a little bit of old school there, because I know I've done it. I'm like Mr. Old School, even more than you, Keith, is that I go to truck stops
Mm.
and literally talk to truckers, which in and of itself is quite the skill set. But doing things like that, if something interests you, go talk to the people who are doing it. Even if you have no experience in it, people like talking, tell me about your job. What do you like? What do you dislike? What would you change? They enjoy that.
Absolutely. And I can actually
Cassie.
chime in
Yeah.
here as well. Um, so I think it's a really honest question because there are a lot of us that are trying to figure out, do we pivot right now? I know for me in particular, I'm a technical recruiter and we've got a really rough market right now. And so well, have you considered something else? And you really have to then do some soul searching and think, well, this is kind of what I'm really passionate about. And I worked really hard to get into this space. So I don't know if I'm ready to let it go. But if I get to the point where, I have to pivot, here are some things that I would do and what I would recommend to you. First, I would say make a version of your resume that isn't industry specific. More so, make it actually reflect the types of jobs you're looking for. So, say you're trying to go into more executive recruiting, make sure that you are highlighting all of those skill sets and the ways that you brought those skills into your more focused role. So for instance, like I would make sure that my top really talks about all of the success stories I had with V-level or like C-suite, directors and VPs that I worked with, and maybe even have like a quote from one of my hiring managers that was happy with the director level hire that I made or something. So really tailoring it to that, taking out a lot of my super technical stuff. And then also, I would say go a step beyond that and do some research in that specific industry. So say it's something a little bit more niche, like now you're going to go into healthcare. Maybe do some research on the recruiting challenges when you're a healthcare recruiter and start adding some things into your cover letter to make you stand out and show like you're serious that you want to transition and that you have the transferable skills even though you haven't been in the industry. Because I think a lot of us do know and agree that good recruiters can recruit on a lot of different types of roles. But I think that because it's so competitive, employers can kind of have their pick right now. So we have to be that much more skilled in showing them exactly, hey, here's what you want, and here's what I bring to the table, and make sure you like put it right in front of their face that that's a match. So I hope that helps.
I'll take that to a slightly more in your face, what a surprise approach is if you do your research, identify, whether it's AI-ish or pure Boolean or speaking to people, and you want to go transfer to a different industry, perhaps a different company as your target. You write a post on the Blue Devil. I said Blue Devil, yes, that's LinkedIn if you don't know it. And you tag, the companies that you're looking for, some of the industry associations, they all have pages. You tag heads of TA, you tag the person who could be your boss. I mean, you're looking for what you want to be noticed, you want to be contacted. That's a really critical way to do it, is tag people. It's, one of the things that we can actually use it for. But, don't doing just including cover letters, that's great. Because, depending on the ATS that you're applying to, you may or may not get a chance to put that in there. But, so do a post and, be obvious, be not obnoxious, but, be informed, and you will be noticed. When you tag people in a post, they notice. So do that. Think about doing that.
Steve, I have something to say. So, we as recruiters, as seasoned recruiters who've been around for a long time, we know that we're always constantly challenging ourselves. We're faced with challenges. We have to, right now, as Cassie was saying, do we have to reinvent ourselves? Do we have to look and pivot in different directions? Look, we weren't all born a technical recruiter or a healthcare recruiter. We did research. We found what was of interest, like Steve was saying, what we're passionate about. Part of being a recruiter is we're researching, we're searching for things, and we take that, we're more marketable and value to our customers if we're not just a sales recruiter or just a healthcare recruiter. You have to be able to open yourself up to learn different domain spaces and engage in it. And, right now we've got this chat GPT, we've got the AI, we've got the ML, deep learning. So if we don't jump into that forefront and learn those things, it's going to leave us behind. the value. We have to keep constantly, improving our skills
Mhm.
and not be afraid, as Steve was saying, and others, to put ourselves out there. How do we become a technical recruiter? We asked a programmer, we asked a software engineer, what do you do in a day of your life? What exactly? Have you ever seen an expression on a software engineer's face when you ask them what do they do in their job? They're elated because nobody ever asks them what they do. And so they love to talk about it because they'll get a chance to talk about that. We learn from candidates, we learn from one another. So we have to get out there and embrace change. So the person who ever asked the question, how do you get yourself out there? Go out there. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I taught myself a long time ago, don't just be in one pigeonhole area. Make yourself more valuable.
I'm just
Offer
reading.
services. If there's something that you're not all key up on, then just take the time to spend that time to get to know that area.
And ask one of us, if those of us who've been doing it for a few years, we're like we're like parents, or in some cases grandparents, but we like helping people to come up to speed. And it's not a question, look, you're going to have to touch the flame on the stove yourself. We're not going to say don't do it because we touched it ourselves. But once you do touch the flame, we'll be there to help you. It's there are many ways to learn it. Some comments, and I'll get to some of the questions. We have some really good questions coming up too.
Brian has his hand up.
I'm sorry?
Brian has his hand up.
Oh, Brian, I'm sorry. Where are you? There you are.
I'm here.
Brian.
Yeah. So I do have a question. If for Dr. Vachon, I have a question for you about the labor market and the recruiting space. Do you see a compression in the market space right now for recruiters? Because I think that almost all of us on here have experienced it, or I went through 3 rifts in 5 years, right? Right before COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, right? And I'm in my 40s. I don't want to do this again. Is this a space where mid-level management is getting pushed out due to AI and things of that nature? Do you see anything that is saying like the recruiting market's going to come back, or is it because we've got 20-year-olds who are getting these roles coming out of college, and then you have executive HRs who are, they're coming back into the market as well. So I don't know if that was a proper way to question that, but I'm
No,
curious.
I think I know what you're saying, and I haven't seen evidence of that, but I do think like everything with COVID has just been a really, for lack of a better word, like weird response to everything, right? It's all been unprecedented. Everything has been kind of dialed up to an 11, either in a good or bad way. So we had the really big challenges, a lot of job losses, and then pretty quickly as we adapted, we realized, oh, we can work remotely. HR teams were tasked with figuring that out. Then businesses realized, oh, well, we can actually hire more people. We can, especially tech companies did a lot of hiring. Wages were going up, so that pay transparency was becoming a thing, even more prevalent. And HR was in one of the most in-demand jobs. And as we, like that graph that I showed, I think one of the second graph where it was like, record hiring back to normalization can feel like you're falling off a cliff as opposed to just normalizing. I do think we should see a little bit more stabilization over the next year. Well, that's one thing I didn't have time to talk about in the talk earlier, but this Friday's jobs report and kind of what we see going forward, I think as we see hopefully some more normal positive jobs reports where nothing is out of whack, businesses will start to get a little bit more confident and kind of retooling their HR functions or looking to recruiters again. We have seen some improvement in the employment for like temporary, the sector is called temporary employment services, I believe. That has started to improve. It's still negative on the last 6 months, negative year over year, but we're starting to see that number become less and less negative over time. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but I would imagine things start to stabilize a little bit as we get through the end of the year.
See, Brian, the one thing I can, the swing, the statistical swing, last 24 months, actually it's more like 36 months, 30 to 36 months, you're seeing less polarization in certain job categories. I can speak to having gone through multiple paradigm shifts in hiring, from the personal computer, the internet that was developed by Al Gore, Y2K, post 9/11, 2006, 2007, word-based security. All these things, all new technologies invariably create many, many new jobs that never existed. I mean, Mal, if you go to BLS, ONET Online, BLS, and whatnot, you see these new categories. The little fire icon, you know, if you follow it seasonally, you do see the changes. And I mean, I've been, friends of mine, I show them how to use the GPTs for all variety of things in recruiting. And the people who rarely started by thinking, oh my goodness, it's going to take my job, then come back and say, well, no, it's not going to change my job. I need to change my thinking. The reality of it is there will be people in TA who will find themselves perhaps not in TA or in much narrower roles in TA. But what everyone here has, and I suspect so many people in the audience have, is I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to strain myself to learn it and apply it. And I mean that's the big saving grace is try it. Don't be afraid of it. It's not going to come out and give you a computer virus because you're playing with AI.
And I think, Steve,
Valerie.
to add to your point, just going back to the AI piece, I think with HR and recruiting functions, there's such a human aspect of that literally Gen AI is kind of the opposite of. And where the technology is right now, we've all used it a little bit. And the writing, some of the things are just at this point so stilted that I don't think, if it can make a lot of aspects of the job easier, but that human touch is still going to be there and still a needed skill that is just really in demand in today's market. I think Keith had a hand up as well.
I do. And thank you, Dr. Bashan. And please excuse if you've already covered this in your presentation. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here. But my question is, as I mentioned, I've been recruiting a long time, and I've seen expansions, I've seen contractions. What I haven't seen before is this sort of disconnect where overall unemployment rate remains low, but within particular sectors like TA, you have a very high unemployment rate. Did you discuss, or would you discuss, what the possible cause of that disconnect has been?
So I did actually get into this a little bit. So if you look at how industries, different sectors of the economy have grown, like overall, like you said, the labor market is strong by pretty much every metric. You could look at wage growth is strong, hiring is strong, job openings, which were reported today, are strong. The unemployment rate is low. But when you look at job growth, about half of the sectors, maybe a little bit over half, have performed really well in the last 6 months and really well over the last year. And then the other half have lost jobs over both of those timeframes. And there's very few that are kind of on the other ends of that spectrum that are in between. You're either really good or really not so great. And the other piece is that while, yes, there have been job losses, I think TA employment services has really suffered. On the aggregate, even only information has lost jobs. So only that tech and entertainment has lost jobs over the last 12 months. But when you dig deeper into some things related to finance as a result of interest rates going up and the housing market kind of being stopped up right now, there have been other challenges. But feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn with any questions, like industry specific stuff. And my slides will have that as well that get circulated through.
Yeah, Mallory, that's actually the really good point. Is the undercurrent, the understatement there is the cyclical nature of the economy. Um, I call it being a pest. There are political, economic, social, technological forces that do this, do this, do this. And when TA bears has we and TA has borne the brunt of strategies that haven't worked. And so, okay, we need to ramp up. Firstly, tech hiring, correct me if I'm wrong, is roughly 5.7, 5.9% of the economy in terms and employment rather. So it's and you know, does that sound kosher enough?
Potentially. Yeah.
Potentially,
We'll go with
potentially
it.
is good. We're talking about potentially. It's a good enough. And and so, but the thing about tech is people in tech are you can assume that they're much more facile with social media. So when all rifts take place, man, that's where the activity takes place. So it sounded in many cases much worse than it might be. Of course, it was bad. But the problem is TA as a function, we've been, talent advisor versus order taker. If you're an order taker, and Keith, I know we've talked about this years ago, but I'm not dying here. But if you're an order taker, you're dispensable. If you're a talent advisor, you're not. And that's a kind of a rough bifurcation, but that's where I'm going for it. The more everyone here and everyone that we tend to congregate with, we are talent advisors. And it really is incumbent upon us as an industry is in fact to lead up and speak to, the negativity about our craft. No, it's not good enough to have a crappy job description. It's not good enough to let hiring managers say, just send me all the resumes. I'll know when I see it. It's not good enough to implement an ATS without understanding how all the integrations work. That's on us. A couple of really good questions. I want to get to Sheila. Sheila wrote, as a chief people officer, I'd like to know why TA is now ghosting candidates. Why are processes not being developed to avoid this and enable two-way communication with candidates? Why has ghosting? Is ghosting something new? Anybody here? Pat?
Like I said on my presentation, I ghosted my candidates when I was working full time.
Bad girl.
Yeah. Yeah, it was bad. And like I mentioned in my presentation, I like treating my candidates the same way I would like to be treated. And that went down the drain. And it's not nothing new. We just got to be more aware of it and try to make it better. I don't know what other suggestions that our colleagues have there. Also, I think part of the candidates ghosting is that there have been so many layoffs in the recruiting industry that companies are short on recruiters and too many people applying and they get overwhelmed. I think that could be part of the reason.
Can I'd like to add a little piece to that as well. Just this is Brian. From my experience within the job, like being a career seeker, a job seeker, and also helping folks navigate the space. And specifically, I work with the veteran community, and I've been doing this for almost a decade now. Is that there are too many people that are applying top of funnel for every recruiter to reach out to them. So if you don't have, I mean, it's really just bad data coming in. Like I did an experiment a couple weeks ago. I bought a product from an Indian programmer, and it will easy apply to every position that has a recruiter title in it for me. So it'll just go and literally it's a SQL overlay. It just does it for me. So I did 1,500 applications within about a 3-hour period. Now, what was the responses back on that? I got 2 calls, and they were both spam calls. I have not received any good data from it. What does that tell me? That tells me that these easy apply, we're making it so easy top of funnel that we're not actually filtering out. We're not filtering out the good or bad candidates. We're just like everybody at the top. And so everybody has the same experience. I mean, if you've got if you've got a weak net, if your net has a bunch of holes in it, it doesn't matter how much you're filling it up with water, you're just losing all your water, right? So it doesn't actually make a lot of sense to have these top of funnels. Let's make it as easy as possible. Indeed and LinkedIn, I blame them wholeheartedly for this. Number two, I blame ACMs, like think Workday, Oracle, SAP. Yes, I know this is going to be out there. Come at me. Come at me, bro. Like these groups, like they they didn't build this for the candidate. They also didn't build this for the recruiter. They built this specifically for the rest of the business units. And so these two things have led to this idea that if we get thousands and thousands of candidates in, we'll get the one unicorn. Top talent is not a real thing. This has been my TED Talk. You're welcome. But yes, it's a great question from a CPO. We've been ghosting for decades. Unless we go back to programmatic hiring, that's not going to change. If you programmatic hire, then you have that opportunity. Recruiters can't talk to 1,000 people a day or a week or a month or a year. Those metrics don't make sense. And they wouldn't make sense in sales, they wouldn't make sense in marketing. You build top of funnel, it needs to be quality. So that's my TED Talk for the day.
Mr. Schultz.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll let Keith go. I think Keith had his hand up first. Go ahead.
Bum
Thank
Russell.
you.
You're next to each other.
Yeah. Well, again, I talked about this. I've actually been talking about this sort of thing for years. I think it's because the people at the top don't care. There are all these possible solutions, not to eliminate ghosting because we're human beings. There are going to be people who, whatever the best intentions, the most efficient system, they're going to be falling through the cracks. But it would be very easy and very affordable, as I outlined in my talk, to be able to greatly minimize this. And I have not seen any leadership at the top saying, by golly, we are going to eliminate this problem. We are going to improve candidate experience in a quantitative, measurable way, because they don't care. It doesn't matter to them. It's not going to affect their bottom line. It's not going to affect their bonus if 100,000 people get screwed. That's what I believe.
Mr. Schultz, you got to follow that up.
Yeah. Okay, so I think ghosting is related to a whole lot of other problems with recruiting process, that it's just become way too overcomplicated. Sarah was mentioning in the chat about how somebody went away for like 3 weeks, and so it took 6 weeks before she even got a rejection notice. And she was mentioning about how there's too many apps involved and stuff. There's just way too many interviews. That's something that I've really noticed recently. I am suddenly getting like 3 interviews for everything, and I'm just like a mid-level recruiter. Why am I talking to an executive guy that I'll never report to? Or even worse, why is an executive guy the final decision maker that I'll never report to? Like, I have never hired for a role, not including the tech interviews, that required more than 2 interviews, unless it was an exec role. That's the only thing I've ever had to wait on an exec to make the final decision for, or send someone to talk to an exec to. And now it seems like everything is like a director is getting involved, or like a VP or something. Like there's just too many interviews. Okay. You have your screen, you have your behavioral interview, you're done. One proper interview and done. I don't understand why there's so many. So this is just crazy to me. And so the more people you have, the more cooks in the kitchen, right? The more you're going to spoil things. And also you're going to lose track of where you are in the process, especially if somebody's going on vacation for 3 weeks. That's just ridiculous. So people are losing track of where candidates are. Has somebody even made a final decision yet? Has somebody got back to them? Whose responsibility is it to get back to them? Just like one screen call, one interview. Can we get back to that? Let's get back to that. And I think we'll see ghosting go way down, because it's just like the amount of like interviews out there, it's just gone out of control. Thank you for my TED coming to my TED talk. I need to get that off my chest.
Excuse me, I was on mute. What we can do is let's just go around and give one more piece of advice to the listeners on what any type of advice that you've experienced in the last couple of months or preparing for your presentation. Leave us with one piece of advice, and then we can go around and then wrap it up. David, why don't you start?
Oh, okay. One piece of advice. Already touched on it, and somebody else already touched on it. I think tailoring your interview is tailoring your CV and is really important. I mentioned in your talk also beefing up your LinkedIn, make it almost as full. I'm mentioning more than one thing here. Sorry. So I would like tailor your CV to the job post as much as possible. Thank you.
Larry, how about you?
Yeah, mine would be change your networking approach. Like I was reaching out to a ton of people just asking for jobs, asking for help, and not providing any value in the communication. And ever since I've changed the value prop of, hey, I don't lead with asking for the role. I lead with, I know somebody, or I'm running this, or I can help you with XYZ. And people are much more responsive. And then they want to help you because you want to help them. So does it work every time? No, but it certainly works a lot more than when I was just asking for stuff. So that's what my presentation was around, is just changing the way that you outreach and providing value first.
Patrick?
Put me at the last at the end. I'm still thinking.
Sure. Tom?
Yeah, so bottom line, folks have said it before, but you got to keep learning. You got to combine your emotional intelligence with this artificial intelligence. So ChatGPT, it just really opened my eyes. And what the biggest thing that I think is going to become, I mean, it's hot now, it's just going to get even more, is becoming a prompt engineer. Learn these prompts. Companies are going to want to see these prompts. So just keep learning, become that prompt engineer, and it's going to set you up for good things in the future. Thank you.
Miss Rodriguez.
Hello. Be empathetic. And avoid misconceptions, obviously. And reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. I was one of those that was afraid to reach out to senior leaders of our community. And now I'm not afraid. I go into the recruiter therapy group and I'm sending questions and I'm reaching out to everybody on LinkedIn. And obviously, like I think it was David said so, that, your approach on how, no, it wasn't David, it was Larry, your approach of following up with people on LinkedIn, making connections. Try to make it as best as possible, not just like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Oops. Because they're not going to respond. Make a better approach and maybe drop a question about the industry and that kind of thing, basically.
Mallory?
Sounds good. Yeah, I would say mine is, and this came up a lot today and relates back to some of the data that we see, is don't be afraid to switch industries. It might be necessary. It might be a way to have a stepping stone to your next career, your next role. I've done this several times in my career. It's never easy, but everything kind of ends up tying together with a little bit a bow on it after, when you look back with a little bit of perspective. And then just I think really being active on LinkedIn. It's something that I started a couple of years ago, and just engaging with not only the HR recruiting TA community, but then also with other economics professionals. And I feel like I've really grown my network, and I've also started to actually grow my company's network. So that's another skill that you have. Like maybe you're joining a small team. Hey, I can pitch in on LinkedIn. I know how to create content. I have gotten in front of these eyeballs, and, let me know how I can help there. And that's been, no one would think, oh, you're the economist at this startup, but I also have kind of a little bit now of a niche in LinkedIn that I think is a really marketable thing, especially in the HR recruiting TA space.
Holly, how about you?
Kind of to piggyback off of Mallory is to get uncomfortable. I think that's one thing I actually took away from the March conference that you guys held as well. Is this was out of my comfort zone. With that, challenge yourself, get comfortable with understanding AI, chatbots, things like that as well.
Tamara?
Mine is human kindness. It's being kind to one another, and twofold, communication. Somebody's already talked about it. We've all been talking about that. If a candidate reaches out to you as a recruiter, as a talent manager, and they're trying to connect, it doesn't hurt to respond, especially if they take an extra steps to connect with you because they are excited about opportunities. If you see a job posting out there and you're looking for yourself, think about somebody else who might be in the same boat as you and tag them in a comment section if you see something that looks worthy that they might be interested in, because your reach out could make a difference in that person's life. So I think the human touch, the human kindness would be my answer here.
Ryan?
Yeah, I would say whether you're employed or unemployed, always be learning, like other folks have said. You never know what tool or capability either you're gonna master or really just thoroughly enjoy immersing yourself in, and that can easily set you apart from other individuals. And if you're able to solve more than one problem, the more profitable you are to an organization or more impactful you are to an organization. And I just think when you immerse yourself like that, you enjoy your career journey more too.
Cassie?
Mine is to say yes. Say yes to like opportunities like this where you can get yourself out there and really go outside of your comfort zone. Real quick, I had like plenty of reasons that I could have said no to speaking on this conference. Dan kind of reached out to me last minute, wanted to add another person to the lineup. I have my 2 kids home right now, unfortunately, with just not working. I had to pull them from daycare, so they're always home. I decided to sign up for 8 different AIR certification courses in like a 6-week span. So like I'm busy, and still without hesitation, the second I was asked, I felt this pull and I was like, oh, yep, I'm scared. That means I'm supposed to do it. So say yes, even if you're scared of doing things. And just to like take that one step further, I want to let you know that already since this presentation that I gave this morning, Steve Levy has given me a phone call, which is someone who I've followed for years. Shannon Pritchett gave me a shout out, and I have Jim Stroud, like the SourceCon man himself, reaching out wanting to have a conversation with me. And I got to tell you, I don't know what this man's going to say, but I've admired him for years. So the answer is going to be yes. So that's my advice. Say yes.
Keith?
When people usually ask me for advice, I tell them something like, please listen carefully to what I say, do the opposite, and you'll be a fantastic success. That being said, I'm going to say something which worked for me in the past. And that was, as far as a job seeker, reach out to your potential hiring manager, find them out on LinkedIn. There's tools that you can get their direct email and send them your resume with a little blurb why you would be good for the job. Most of the people won't get back with you. That's the nature of things. Some of them said no, but when I tried that before, I ended up getting a couple of jobs at the same time. Most people won't do that. So overall, I suggest if you see something that a lot of people are doing, you might want to try something else. That's it for me.
Brian?
The job search and stuff, it sucks. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's the most ubiquitous thing that we do that is really just done poorly. The experience is always going to be bad. The best way that you can change that is to make sure your attitude about it is right. Have grace for yourself. Understand that you're going to get rejected, and you just got to put yourself out there. Take all the advice from all the folks here. This is all your network right here. Like every person in here is networked and networked and networked. And, one of us knows Kevin Bacon, I truly believe, and I will meet him one day. But you got to give yourself grace. The job search sucks. It's hard. I'm on day 89 and it's hard. And there's nothing about it that's going to change except reach out, have the conversations with the folks in here and ask, and a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So ask, put your ask out there, and also make sure you're giving back to the community. Every person in here probably needs something. Learn what that need is. Weave a tapestry of your network and not just go in and try to sell it as, I believe in net weaving, not networking, right? I'm weaving a tapestry of all these folks in here, figure out what you guys need, what you want, and how we can all bring it together.
Patrick.
Yeah, so the downside of going last is everyone has said what you've thought of, so it just gets harder. But I'll just kind of echo what other people have said, and that is obviously the job search is tough right now. The market is unique. It's not going to stay this way forever. Just remain positive, keep at it. You know, I didn't mention this during my presentation, but I've been looking since July, so quite a while. But even so, like over the last 3 months, or even before that, noticeably gotten better, and it's only going to continue to do so. So it's all about attitude, effort, and energy, I'd say, to a degree.
Awesome. Well, again, I just want to say thank you so much for all the presenters that got vulnerable to make an impact that extends beyond a handshake. This is going to be incredible of hearing the success stories that come out of this, out of the chat room, the presenters, all the people that are involved. So I really, really appreciate that and excited to hear those. So if you see a need, fill the need. And if you hear a success story that came out of this, the community needs to hear it because you never know how it's going to impact your story to somebody else. So I really appreciate it. Any last minute words of advice, Steve Levy, as we wrap up?
As everyone here has said it, it's a simple phrase. It's be courageous. And one final thing is years ago, our very good friend Derek Zeller and I, he's since passed on, wrote a really good blog post called "My Name Is Not Candidate." If you haven't read it, do so. My name is not Candidate, Zeller and Levy. So when you get back on the job, treat people the way that you want to be treated.
Awesome.
And don't take
thanks
shit
again,
from people who
everybody,
think
for
otherwise.
attending. And if you haven't got that PDF, feel free to download that. Get involved with the Hire Easy community. We have a recruiting therapy scheduled for this Thursday, and we'll recap what went on, some of the experiences, some of the highlights that went on in this conference. And like I mentioned, by the end of the week, we will have it on the YouTube playlist and have some communication out. So you have each specific presentation and session to revert back to and share with your hiring leaders, hiring managers, companies, and everybody else involved. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch.